Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and perhaps in some part of the world, it is also good night. Welcome to the first plenary of the RISE World Day of Programming after the wonderful start that we had at the opening plenary yesterday here in Mumbai, India. Today, we will talk about systems thinking, the foundational element of the summit and of everything that we believe in. I am joined with me four very wonderful people who are equal travelers in this journey of systems change and transformation, who truly believe in it. And I think that that's going to be the basis for us all to share what we believe we need to do, and that is unpacking systems thinking. We also launched, along with the RISE World Summits and the RISE Values yesterday, the RISE Toolkit. And this is a compendium of various models and frameworks that we hope that all our users and all our associates will think about utilizing them in their own programs as well, because systems thinking is the need of the hour. Thank you very much once again for joining us, and we are going to get started. With me is Mr. Tom White, Chief of Emergency at UNICEF India. On my left, I have Mr. Sarabjit Singh Sahota, Emergency Specialist DRR at UNICEF India again. I also have with me Manvi Kulshetra, the Policy Officer at FES India, and Manu Goel, who are joining us virtually, the Director of Novak Consultants, at this opening plenary to talk about their experiences and thoughts about systems thinking, and perhaps maybe a little bit about value creation. But yes, with systems thinking. I'm also going to ask very differently, as you all know, we do at the RISE World Summit, a very quick, maybe one line introduction about themselves, a self-introduction, in fact, so that we do it as the theme of the summit goes, think different and act together. So with that, we shall get started. Tom, could we start with you, man? Yes.
Okay. So, first of all, Tom, thanks for the introduction and for all of the part of the session. I don't go too far into that's the format I really appreciate that.
Yes.
I just really like the session, because I really want to see the tapestry that you're working. And so let's say that somebody who's focused on outcomes for people who are particularly the most vulnerable, the hardest to reach and so on. That's my interest in that. My father is trying to do that. I continue one here with
I know, unfortunately. So let's go online so that we do this a little bit in terms of switching. Manvi, would you like to do a very quick self-introduction, as we said?
Sure, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, IDOBRO, for including me in this panel discussion. It's an honor and a pleasure to be speaking amongst such expert speakers. My name is Mandvi Kulshresht, and I am I work as a program advisor, to be correct semantically. With Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, it's a German think tank. I have a background or a training in urban planning, and I've been working with FES since many years now, most of the part on gender mainstreaming, gender justice, but also for a decade now already on socio-economic transformation, which talks about issues such as climate change. So basically, socio-ecological transformation and also future of work and how to basically bring these together. Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarabjit, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. Certainly, I'm late for my activities. I'm an architect, I'm a designer, working in the industrial management for more than 30 years. Systems technically comes naturally to me. Partly because I'm training as an architect. But it's a passion. So very passionately, I'm trying to practice it as a behavior. I know it's not talked about anywhere as a behavior, but it is. So looking forward to wonderful discussion with all one of us and be.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarabjit. Manu, can we have you try?
Hi, hello to everyone. My name is Manu. I am an architect planner by background, and I head a consultancy. We work across various areas of intervention. First of all, I'd like to thank Tidobro, and I'd just read the tagline which is visible here, which is multiplier impact, which I think through our work we are trying to do in multiple ways. So we work across design of buildings, engineering, as well as master planning. And through our planning projects, what we've been trying to do is to mainstream design as part of urban planning through physical infrastructure projects. So that's like a little background. I'm from Delhi, so warm. I think Mumbai is not that cold.
Systems thinking is at work right now as we speak. I did not know this, that three of you are all architects.
And the first one is the public one.
Just imagine. I mean, there you go, right? I mean, I know I should be doing a lot more research, but what I really knew about you, I did not know your academic part of it. But this is it, right? I mean, this is how systems thinking, systems approach works, where you don't understand the connections maybe up front, but somewhere there are those connections. And sometimes those connections are so strong that it's just almost unbelievable. Like right now, I cannot believe that 3 out of 5 are architects on this session, right? So yeah, great. I mean, this is again, as I said, proof of systems thinking at work, systems approach at work, that when you start interlinking people just because of what they do, you suddenly discover so much more that is there, that is possible in terms of commonality, as well as obviously common understanding, right? So great. Thank you very much for that brief introduction by all of you. I think, as we said, we really want to start and talk about unpacking. And I'm actually going to go to Sarabjit first, because he was the one, when we were discussing, he said, unpacking, Kiran, that's what we need to do. So Sarabjit, when we talk of systems thinking, I think there are so many different misconceptions, and there are so many of these, ideas that people make, assumptions that people make, right? So if you were to unpack it for people, what would you say about systems thinking?
Difficult question.
Well, you cannot expect an easy one, right?
Yeah. See, the wisdom traditions of the world on the stuff about everything one.
Right.
You've got it.
Yes.
So systems thinking is about everything.
Absolutely.
But in the modernized 1950s, starting in the 90s, that's when formally got sitting very some. And I would say this is a good start. Good development, good people, good process. And a total brings both the things together. Then the results become more predictable. I think it's a magic practice. Many times when we talk about systems thinking, people etc. Some of them might just decide to escape. Partly because we talk about one goal,
But then there are subsystems within the system. And I'm comfortable when I work in my work. I'm more focused on bringing subsystems together.
Yes.
And the recipe which works for me is it is a mix of communication, knowledge management, information management, sometimes knowledge building. And then once we start all the time with communication and communication, communication challenges.
Yeah.
Because the past and now move in a direction until we communicating the right direction. And I think I'll start by telling you the difficult part. That the creative tension between the credit for the past.
Yes.
And what they do. So everyone is doing the best, but who gets the credit? There's always a creative tension. And I think the role of people who are leading the system, how they tread a very difficult path. I think that's the sort of the critical success factor. Communication and that leadership to overcome that.
So
That's really critical. Because majority of us will credit for
what we do, right.
Yeah, you're contributing to the whole.
Correct.
Which is
Much bigger. Yeah. I think bringing it down and simplifying it to say that, a system is made of subsystems, and then you have the super system, right? Where also you bring in multiple systems together to again create a super system. So both ways work, breaking it down to subsystems as well as, aggregating it to take it to a super system. And that I think is what the big difficulty in terms of either relating to it or managing, as you said, and therefore the need of communication and the need of all the other tools, knowledge management, technology, to be able to keep them all together and ensure that people are on the same page. Great. I also would ask Tom right away to also maybe given what he feels is about systems thinking, and what are the difficulties you face when you think about systems thinking, whether it's from your work or in general terms.
Karen,
Yes.
can I just, sorry to intervene. But
the conversation. So go ahead. Yes.
But we are not able to hear Tom or Sarabjit because there is an echo when they speak. So,
is it?
I mean, yeah, the introductions I could hardly make out, but right now the intervention, absolutely nothing
All right.
comes through.
Sure. Let's. Thank you. Yes, we definitely want all our. Yes, this is. And we definitely want all our participants on the platform to be able to hear all of us very clearly, for sure. Could you hear me now without an echo, or was there still an echo?
Yours is very clear. I think because the mic is in front of you, yours is very clear. But for both of them,
so these mic need to be on. Okay. Got you. All right. Many parts of the system are moving right now to make this happen.
I'm happy to have,
yes,
initiated that.
Yeah. So why don't we do one thing while we get our mics in place? Manu, why don't you all go ahead and say a few words about what you think as a starting point in terms of systems thinking, and how does that really play out for you all?
Man, do you want to go first? Okay, so I think first of all, as we say in design, because we work across different scales, so it's like, systems like a big elephant, and I think we all may be operating on one part of the system, like Sarabjit sir said, maybe like a subsystem. But I think it's very, very important for everyone to have a zoom in, zoom out approach, to be able to see the system as a whole in totality, and understand the linkages so that you can multiply your impact, as IDPRO likes to say. So I think that's the importance for me, that I feel that, the systems approach is basically about the mindset, and it's about your perception, so that you can work at various scales, and you can work across various industries to be able to create a larger impact in whichever domain that you're sort of working in, whichever sectors you're working. Yeah, that's what my feedback on systems thinking. Manvi, you want to add to that?
Sure. I mean, as you said, that totally resonates with me as well. And I would say that one of the premise that I would approach systems thinking is that, you have to understand that, okay, the usual way of going about things is not working, and probably that's why we are spiraling into more crisis day by day. And another thing that is to be considered is that usually whenever we are approaching any problem or challenge, it's always, us versus them. So I am doing the right thing, and the other person is not doing the right thing, or I am coming from a value-based approach, but the other person is not. So that us versus them, wall has to be broken to get into a systems thinking approach. Otherwise, you're still stuck inside your own echo chamber, inside your own bubble, and you think that you have expanded the perspective, but it would still remain within in your echo chamber. So that breaking that, not the glass ceiling, but yeah, breaking that wall between different actors is really
I
important.
think that is something what Sarojit also kind of said earlier, right, about the communication piece, right? If you don't have, because people have this perception that I'm the only one doing it, as you rightly said. So if we have communication, we have knowledge management, and we're sharing that, the chances are it will break down those barriers a little bit more and help people to come together, right?
Build trust.
And build trust, absolutely.
Build
trust. I think that's the key word as well. If you don't have trust and respect, the chances of you being able to work with others in an ecosystem is really, really difficult. Yeah. Tom?
Yeah.
You've been writing notes.
Well, kudos to the speakers. No, I think it's a fantastic question, and I don't think there's a perfect answer.
Can we hear?
Yes. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, there we go. Systems.
Yes.
So, I think, firstly, I like a lot of what's been said. I like the zoom in, zoom out element there.
That was very nice.
But at the same time, that somehow implies that we have an idea of where to zoom out to and what we want to look at. And I think one of the big issues about systems is there are so many systems, or there is one big system that nobody fully understands, right? Nobody really understands what is the system, and is it a universe, is it a galaxy, or at what point does it stop? And what role do we play in that, whether it's a system or a subsystem, and so on. But I always remember a phrase that my grandmother used to use, and it's, whenever something happened that we weren't quite ready for or prepared for, it's all part of the rich tapestry of life. And I think that is the system that I have always kind of found myself trying to find my way in. And it's the same philosophy I try to teach my kids too. Be prepared for something. Don't expect to know what it's going to be. I think, Sarah, I like your reference to behavior as well. I think somehow that puts a responsibility on our shoulders to be collaborative in our way in order to contribute to help achieve something bigger than we are capable of doing on our own, whether organizationally or community-wise or even at a household or individual level. But there are so many systems that we need to work out. I think, just going back to our introductions, I found that very interesting, where we all somehow come from similar
backgrounds, absolutely.
Backgrounds, but looking at, I have a public health background, but I also trained as an engineer. So I looked at engineering systems. That was part of my education. But then I see people like us who somehow think it's one part of our brain, if I understood that side of the biology and physiology side of things. So what about those others that don't think on this side of the brain, but think on the other side of the brain? And how do we communicate? Another point that was made earlier. How do we communicate with others that don't think and communicate in the same way as us, or interpret it? They have a different interpretation of different things and events. So, you know, we look at health systems or engineering systems, architectural planning. How do we communicate with artists? I'm a bit ambidextrous in my way, so I like to dabble in the artist field as well as in the more sort of structured way. But how do you talk to an artist about systems? Is there a system in the way that an artist delivers their impressions? What does that look like? And maybe it's not supposed to look like something until they're ready for it to look like something. And, you know, where does it stop and start? But looking at the language, the format, looking at systems need somehow an opportunity to deliver. And there needs to be a kind of perfect storm of opportunity and purpose, as well as capability to deliver whatever that system will be. It's a big conversation.
Yeah. You know, and like they say in systems thinking, you cannot really plan everything, and yet somehow, sometime when the time is right, things drop into place, right? So two things really I want to say. One is, you know, I used to always hear this saying that there is no such thing as luck, okay? Luck is when opportunity meets preparedness, right? So when you prepare and opportunity comes your way, that's when things fall into place. And so right now, one more thing we discovered, and this is what, again, as part of systems approach, right? You keep discovering new things as you keep working on it, you know, so that you get out of that echo chamber that Manvi spoke about, and the whole zoom in and zoom out. So let's zoom out right now. We have two of us here who are engineers and three who are architects. How do you make something like that happen without planning it? Imagine, right? So amazing. And that's what I think is the power of system thinking, right? When you try to bring people together who are working on similar things, who are thinking alike, when you have a value-based approach, but at the same time, you may be having an outcome focus. So, you know, it can be zoom in, zoom out, that what Manu spoke about. You know, you might be starting with a value-based approach, but also somebody else working from an outcome-based approach, and finally you discover that you both are actually doing the same thing. And I think that's the power. So, you know, Manvi, again, you have done a lot of work, especially in terms of propagating systems thinking. And I know through a lot of your partners, you know, you have come up with books and toolkits, etc. So, can you maybe talk a little about toolkits, you know, and tools, which also Sarabjit kind of mentioned, you need those kind of structured processes. So, how can we come up with more tools and any tool you'd like to talk about that would really help people with systems thinking?
So yeah, there are 2, 3 tools that we have been using in the past. One is, of course, design thinking, which is, you know, very well known, and it has really helped us reshape our gender justice program. So there was a certain kind of approach that we used to take for our gender justice program, and but with design thinking, and there is again a toolkit which is available with FES. It's on our website. There are hard copies also available if anyone wants. We were able to bring in more men into, you know, the let's say the part where you need actual action on ground. So usually you see men, I mean, whenever you're talking about gender mainstreaming, you know, you're focusing more on women and, you know, women's empowerment or women's inclusion and stuff. But when you say, okay, it has to go beyond the, you know, usual, go beyond women and also go beyond the binaries, then you have to include men and other genders into the conversation and see them as, you know, equal stakeholders. So that's one tool that we have been using. The other very in-house tool that we use is called transformative change making, which works in 2 manners. Again, the toolkit is available on our website, and there are hard copies in the offices if anyone wants. So there are 2 things that it says one should be considering. That you know, for any transformative change to take place, because societies are ever transforming, and you know, what we do through policy interventions or even multi-stakeholder dialogues is that we kind of create another transactional culture. And one then needs to move beyond this transactional relationship to into a more transformative relationship. And for that, you need transformative actors on board. And that's why I said that otherwise you circle within your own echo chamber. So a transactional approach is still within your echo chamber, but when you have to go towards transformative approach, this is where you bring in those actors who are usually not part of your echo chamber, which is basically people who have the political or the economic capital. Because I mean, we all know that whenever you're talking about any societal kind of a change, the progressive voices are mostly at the margins. And the political capital or the economic capital lies with the people or the groups who have who are at the center of this the popular discourses in the society. So thinking about, then start thinking about what are the interests these people have, uh, do, and they will also do the, do the right thing, because it's not the right thing to do, but for them it is the right thing to do. So that convergence of interests and convergence of discourses has to happen. And then you have to exemplify. So you can't just be like on paper, you have a very beautiful, nice, discourse or a narrative, but it has to be exemplified through a project. And that project has to again go through a process of vetting as to, whether this works or not. So it's like a two-way approach. So build a discourse or build a popular narrative around, what are the current narratives, try to bring in the progressive voices as well, but also see what are the discourses of the political or economic actors, and on the side exemplify it with a catalytic project. So this is one tool that we use, and another is that we have often used, like in the last 4 or 5 years, is something called transformative change development program, which talks about which says that unless until you transform yourself, like you have to have personal transformation along with societal transformation, because at the end of the game, whoever is working on societal transformation is a human, is an individual. And then there are certain, certain, say, certain things that hold us back. Could be, could be my fears, could be my own, background conversations with how I interact with some other actors who I don't think are on my side. So first I have to, overcome those barriers myself, and alongside, I will, enable that societal transformation. So this is again one systems thinking tool that we use.
Great. And I think a little bit on the personal part of it, as you just now said, that we are finally people ourselves. So how we relate starts with us and what we believe and how we live, which is again what we talk in the rise with the rise values. That it is our values drive us to action. Our values shape our behavior. What Sarabjit mentioned earlier as well. And so if we don't look at that, and also the tapestry of life as something that Tom brought up, you really need to understand that how we relate to things will define how we finally act and behave.
Exactly.
Other things further, right? And I'm glad you brought up the thought of design, because I think that's something that Manu does beautifully day in and day out in all her projects. And Manu, you're very passionate about design for impact, right? Please do let us know, how do you think that fits in and helps with the systems thinking approach, as Madhvi also kind of spoke about it.
So look, as architects, we are trained to look at various systems, whether it is your physical environment or your social environment or the needs of the particular occupant. But then we ultimately work with a site, right? With one space that you're designing. But then as you kind of zoom out and you start working with communities and you start working with physical infrastructure projects of cities, you understand that the impact of the work is much larger. So you then also start looking at other systems which are integrated in multiple ways with your physical environment, whether it is the economy of the city, or it is the lifestyle change, or it is the air quality, for example, or like for example, I'll cite a case. Like if I'm if I'm designing one physical infrastructure project for a city, it is very important for it to work very well in terms of the way it's going to function financially, as in how is it going to, I'll put capex and I'll put the project, but then it has to start maintaining itself as it goes along. So it has to be economically viable. It has to make business sense as well. So when we do DPRs, when we do reports, we try and integrate a lot of these systems as we go along. So it starts with stakeholder consultations, where we, sort of look at different sections of the society. We also kind of bridge the gap between the government authorities, for example, or whichever organizations trying to put that project up. And we create that space for a dialogue. So that brings in one sort of integration at that level. And that then after that, we also do like a gap assessment of like, let's say, for example, population growth projection, any gaps in physical environment, any infrastructure gaps that need to be highlighted, and then establishing a vision for that entire infrastructure project in the long run, because our projects tend to be for a larger span of time, and then they will also transform and evolve as the society starts to use those spaces. And then eventually we try and mainstream design. So far, planning was not that much into the private domain. I mean, it's only in the past 8 to 10 years that private companies, private organizations, and private players are having a say in the physical infrastructure design and their manifestations. And then we also try and bring in various experts, like there are solid waste experts, there are, transportation engineers, there are, so various people from various sectors, so that all these energies and all these learnings are integrated at the very basic level. And then we also make a business plan for the project that you're putting in, which gives an impact assessment in terms of how it is going to change the lifestyles, what are the deliverables, what are the KPIs that we're looking for from the project to the society, and how to track them, and how is it going to evolve in terms of business, how the RFPs are going to be floated out, how is the O&M of that project going to happen. So all of those things. So I think when I look at design is not in an independent silo. I think design ultimately has a very, very sort of far-reaching impact, and a lot of threads kind of join in such projects especially. So it's very much it requires a much wider systems approach if I look at physical infrastructure projects particularly.
Right. So, you spoke about design thinking as a forward-looking thing, because, how it is, but you also said at the end about impact, right? What is going to be the impact? I think systems thinking is also something that you can use after the fact. So while we're talking about designing for something that's going to happen, what about when we are reflecting about something that has already happened, right? In terms of impact assessment, in terms of a reflection, and that's again something, when you look at the iceberg model, that's exactly what it says, right? What happens, what we see happening is just about 10% of what is the real thing. If you start analyzing what has been happening over a period of time, looking at the trends, looking at the patterns, you suddenly start realizing what are the structures required, or what is the kind of mindset because of which something has happened, or what is the result, right? So when we do impact assessment, and I'm sure, UNICEF has obviously done so many of these for all its programs, how do you see, when we do that kind of impact assessment, do we really give that freedom to go and look beyond the direct programmatic outcomes and impact, or do we just kind of say, no, that's it, but we cannot really worry about how it is? Obviously, we cannot. So how do you see that happen? The impact assessment, encouraging impact assessments to take a systems. I think that's really what we should be pushing for, because then the design also will follow that a lot more easily. Do you think?
Yeah, simple, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Easier said than done. But we're all focused on today, right? We all want today, yeah.
Indeed. And I think, thanks for the challenge, because it very much is a challenge for all of us. No, I think if I take the UNICEF example, UNICEF,
on paper, and the front page of what it's all about the children, right?
Absolutely.
If it works for children, hopefully it will work for the majority of others too. But children are always the most vulnerable, right? Not necessarily the only vulnerable, but they're always amongst the most vulnerable. And I think where I enjoy your question and challenge is very much, if we look at the world as a whole,
right,
how much does a private sector industry, whoever it might be, when they're designing a postman or a stairwell or the step onto a bus or whatever it might be,
right,
how much do they consider the needs or
right,
the constraints of a child, the perception of a child when they're reading a poster? Is there a message that they need to read more than anybody else in terms of vulnerability and protection issues? You know, a bus stop, how is that designed considering the needs and the vulnerabilities of children? And I think if we can start, not we as UNICEF, but the world as a whole, if we can start factoring this kind of conversation into the design planning, into the design planning of everything, whether it's a system, whether it's a structure or a service or whatever it might be, but absolutely everything should have some kind of consideration of the most vulnerable, right, children, as an example, they're in the others, depending on the context and the situation. And sort of trying to tie two things together here. And I think much of our work in sort of impact assessment in UNICEF as well is not necessarily trying to identify the impact of regular programs. That's a significant chunk,
of course,
should be the largest chunk. But approximately 50% of resources as a whole go into responding to disasters, whether it's a conflict, whether it's a cyclone or a flood, or we see more and more mountain-related, glacial lake incidents and so on. But disaster response is increasingly a thing, and I think we need to tie in how do we and how do we try to reduce the risk of that. And that ties into everything I said at the first part of my answer, which is how do we really tie in and reduce the vulnerability of the most vulnerable or the hardest to reach or the least visible. Sometimes the most vulnerable are not necessarily the hardest to reach. They're right on our doorstep. We just choose not to see them.
We don't see them. That's so absolutely. And to take that question a little further, Sarabjit, when we talk of impact assessment, we talk about the intended and the unintended, right? The positive and the negative, right? The tangible and the intangible. And that's all, again, part of that systems, right? Because sometimes you just don't really realize, as you say, it's not visible, or we choose to make it invisible, right? So how do you see that coming in, and how can we encourage more and more impact assessments to focus on a systems approach of understanding the kind of impact that they have, whether it is intended or unintended, and whether it's direct or indirect? What would you
Take you a little backwards.
Okay.
Within the UN system in 2020, or slightly before that as well, we started discussing, because we all of a sudden found ourselves not implementing what we had planned. And we were responding to COVID crisis across the board. And we had done 5-year plans and annual plans and whatnot. So what's happening to that? And so I think, started discussing what is adaptive program. And that is what was our initial sort of response to bringing systems thinking into the whole piece. So, and some organizations within the UN system, for example, UNFPA and some others, have already started shifting their systems, financial, administrative, and range of other things which control us from doing certain things.
structures.
So good, you remind me of structures. So in the again referring to the Western traditions, the spiritualists would believe that spontaneity gives life and structure kills. Yeah, and we don't need to go that far.
Right.
You need structure for certain reasons. Otherwise, you can't deliver certain services. to a certain standard, but spontaneity to respond to what is emerging.
Right.
I think that's the adaptive program. Yet remaining there. Yeah? So for impact assessments in such situations, humanitarians, I mean, me and Tom, we work on that side. We had invented long ago the real-time evaluations, because emergencies are dynamic environment. You cannot make a fixed plan and then move towards the impact. No, you're responding to the emerging situation. So real-time assessments, evaluations, monitoring continuously. So our cycle of monitoring or evaluation is much shorter compared to the development systems. Development systems would evaluate the program after maybe 4 years, 5 years down the line. No, we are evaluating it on the go.
Absolutely.
And then changing ourselves. And that's adaptive program. And I think those ethos of working are now coming to the development systems, partly because of sort of being in the changing climate. And
I think if we don't start adopting, we're going to be forced to anyway adopt, right? I mean, that's really what it is coming down to. So I think the earlier and faster we kind of look at doing this, I think the chances are we will be more prepared, hopefully, to kind of deal with it, right? And I think the other part to kind of go back a little bit to the toolkits, and I do want to kind of talk a little on the Code toolkit once again in terms of what we said. There are multiple tools that we talk about: stakeholder mapping, we talk about value co-creation, and this whole question of credit, which you started with, in fact, Sarabjit, I think if we can address that in the beginning, that yes, each of us have a role to play, and we respect everybody's roles, because that's really critical to make that happen, right? How then do we understand that we all have a stake in the final outcome? So that it is not about, I did this, which again, I think Manvi said, that I did this and, I'm doing more than what somebody else did.
Can I add something?
Please.
I mean, when I formally started engaging with the systems thinking, I just adopted a group. His name is Gene Bellingham. He will know that I'm his follower. but I started following him. And one thing he used, very fundamentally, he would explain that billions of years ago on Earth, two gases decided to meet: oxygen and hydrogen. Because the environment was right. They met, gases produced wetness. No amount of research on gases would have led to this idea of wetness. So I think it's very important that you do decide on the finality.
Right.
You've been using this word final impact and final outcome.
Right.
If you decide it in very tight form, then itself it's going against the principles of systems thinking. You decide on the direction. You create an enabling environment for people to come together in their own best interest.
Right.
The problem of development is that we want everyone to lose their self-interest and come together. Now, systems thinking is about coming together in your own self-interest, and then it works.
Right.
Then it works, and then the credit, you get the credits, no? Then you enjoy being in the system.
Yeah.
That you get what you need. That's how it is.
Great, thanks. We are, of course, coming to the end of our time. But I do want to say one more thing, Manvi. I would request if we can have the access to the toolkits and put it on the platform for all the RISE World Summit attendees. I think that I'm sorry. That would be really very, very valuable for all of us, because in the first section, we have pavilions where we put up all kind of resources. There's a resource bank. I would definitely encourage all our participants and attendees to kind of look that up and look it up. We'll also be putting the Code toolkit over there, because I think there is a lot to be said for how can we adapt and adopt, systems thinking, because as you said, adaptive programming is the key to kind of exploring and making sure that you're leveraging the entire potential of the ecosystem without really thinking of a final thing. It's the process that really.
But leadership has a value.
Of course.
The leader has a vision and somewhere
there is a shared vision. That's what I mean in the final thing, that there is a shared vision, or at least there's a vision each one has that has kind of commonalities that can bind people together. And I think that's what really we want to do in systems thinking, bring people together. And as the summit also says, think different and act together. So how can we all think different in the way that we are working, and at the same time, come as much as possible together to kind of act on that. So maybe one final word from all of you, starting with, let's say, Madhvi, and then we can, of course, bring this to a close. Madhvi, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I've put the links to both the guides, transformative change making and design thinking, on the meeting chat. I'll try to also see where I can put it on the website. I think, like you said, yeah, taking on with that systems thinking actually helps us not only understand, what we say, the multi-dimensionality of the challenge, but also the multi-dimensionality of the interest of the stakeholders which are involved, which is really important, and which I think Sarabjit and Tom and Manu, all of us, all of them are also saying. But at the end of the game, what system thinking has to do is to empower. And then again, we're not looking at empowering, say, the marginalized, or, which is usually what development sector people would say. So we are not just thinking of empowering those who are vulnerable or marginalized, but also empower the other stakeholders. So again, don't think, not to think that, okay, empowerment is only for those who are the lesser power, but it has to be a give and take. And it doesn't have to be a minus and an addition. So nobody's power is being extracted and given to someone. That mindset has to also, work simultaneously. But can I also add into that impact assessment conversation that, what we at least try to do, because we are also thinking of this from the social justice perspective, is that this empowerment, we always say, okay, you have to have, any stakeholder should have been at the end of it socially empowered, politically empowered, economically empowered. And to that, I would also say some part of that ecological empowerment or ecological justice also has to come into it. And it has to be a multiplicative process. So even if you lose out on one of these, metrics, then the entire sum is zero. And so your indicators or your KPIs for assessing impact, or the metric has to consider that these four aspects of social justice, economic empowerment, political empowerment, and ecological justice are met. I'll close at that. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Manu, do you want to quickly go and please.
Okay, so the other thing I think a lot of us have touched upon in various ways, which I'd like to add to what I had said earlier, is about human values. So I think while we are taking the systems approach, it's very important for whichever system it is to be cognizant of what is the emotion that you're delivering ultimately through that project, whether it is, like, for example, whoever your stakeholder is, if you're dealing with children, or you're dealing with women, or you're dealing with community at large, or whatever the project is, and in whichever domain it is. Ultimately, if one is cognizant of, how are you going to, again, I'm going back to impact, but how are you going to, what is the emotion that you're trying to actually deliver? So for example, if you're doing a physical infrastructure space, like, are you trying to create pedestrian safety? Are you trying to create safe spaces for children to play? Or are you going to, so the project is less important. It's more important to have the right value, the right emotion, right sort of, impact in place. That's what I think through the systems approach. If we all join hands, then the project will never go wrong. Whatever, it may take more time to get implemented, or it may get implemented in a slightly modified way, but ultimately the impact will be right. And, we'll all move towards a much safer and better space.
Yeah, and that's multiplying your impact. So thanks for bringing that once again. Thank you, Manu. Tom, we will close with you. So.
Oh, no pressure. I think I'm going to leave on a slightly positive note. I think the COVID storm that the world has eventually weathered so far, touch wood, relatively well. I think the world learned to deal with that shock together. Right? Everybody, whether an individual or a household or a community or a private company, a government, a science lab, whatever, everybody found their place to operate. Systems were repurposed to contain, respond, and recover from that pandemic. We're still in it, but we're on the better side of it at this stage, and we continue to learn from it. But everybody had to learn very quickly, and systems shifted relatively quickly. Some faster than others, but the world moved as a whole. And I think the new COVID, in that respect, the new COVID is climate. Climate has been happening for a much longer period, but right now we have far more evidence in front of us than we had ever had before to tell us we need to do things differently. And I think there is a positive note there, that we've learned from COVID, that storm has not been forgotten. It's very fresh in everybody's memory. Every individual on this planet knows what that impact looked like and what needed to be done by them or their people or their organization, whatever, to support the response to recovery and so on. So I think with that in mind, I think there is a positive light there for people to come together, serving themselves to deliver a common goal.
Common goal, absolutely. Thank you very much. I think we have come to our time, end of our time. And I think, this is a topic which you can go on talking about, because there is just so much that it relates to, and there's so much that you can unpack in it, as you said, Sarabjit. But our hope is that we have at least started some people on their journey. We have helped others to get more resources, who are already thinking about it. And hopefully any naysayers, we've definitely started that conversation and dialogue. Because you'll always have those as well, right? People who, as Sarabjit said, run away, in fact, when you start talking about systems thinking. So the hope is that we can slowly bring them back into the conversation, because dialogue, communication, knowledge sharing, knowledge management is the key to getting the right stakeholders together, the multi-stakeholders, the diverse stakeholders that Manu kept talking about, to make sure that we all reach a common goal. Right? So with that, thank you all very, very much. Really pleased to have you all with us today. And this is the first plenary at the RISE World Summit. The start to obviously, 5 days of conversations in the forum, 5 days of exploration through the tours, and of course 5 days of creative impact seeking activities through the fest. So I hope you are tuning in, and yes, we have a whole agenda for you to check out on the platform. Please stay with us, and for now, thank you very much, and have a great day. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure.